Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me. And that's not the 1,733 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. My goodness, not only did we pass 1,700, we're already a third of the way to 1,800. Thank you all so much. As I say every week, the growth has been insane, and I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for commenting. Thank you. In fact, your guys' support has meant so much that I actually have companies wanting to partner with me. So this actually is the time where I'm going to announce I have partnered with Into the AM, which is a men's shirt apparel store. They sent me some shirts to try out, one of which I'm wearing right here, which is actually pretty damn cool. It glows in my game room under blue light, which is sweet. I had a couple of other shirts that I was actually able to wear this last weekend. I slept in them, worked out, did all the normal things. Super comfortable. And if you guys want to check it out for yourself, there is a link in the description down below that gets you 10% off automatically at checkout. Or you can just use the code Luke's Game Room at checkout. If you do, it supports the channel, gives me a little kickback, which helps go into the fund to buying me a new computer. If not, check it out. You know, don't just believe my word. My wife actually said that I look decent for once in these.
It's nicer, it matches, it's neutral, it's not nerdy, it's not embarrassing.
As much as I love wearing my Rocco's Modern Life t-shirt.
When you marry a gamer, you make compromises, some of which you're not even aware of, like this.
Super comfortable. I like them. I like the designs, so not to shill in something I wouldn't wear. I have been wearing it, and I enjoy it, so give them a look. But that's not why you're here today. Why you're here today is there are a lot more sequels to popular games that I had no idea existed, and I wanted to talk about some more of them. So let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Finding out years later there was a sequel to a game series I really enjoyed always bugs me, and I still don't know how it happened, though sometimes it does make sense. So let's start off with one that does make sense, and that would be one that has numerous entries over several different consoles, and that would be the Strike series. So the Strike series first started off with a game called Desert Strike. Now Desert Strike, based off of the popular Desert Strike War, or Operation Desert Storm. That's basically what came about with the inspiration of this game, I think. So this game came out, I had first played it on the Sega channel, but it was on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. Very fun, isometric helicopter game. Then they came out with a sequel called Jungle Strike, and in case you didn't know it's a sequel, it says it right on the box, the sequel to Desert Strike. But then there was another sequel that I didn't know about called Urban Strike, which is the sequel to Jungle Strike. I should have known, it's on the box. However, it didn't stop there. That's where I thought the series stopped, but it didn't. There were more copies and more series games, one of which is Nuclear Strike. It was on the PS1, I think it was on the N64 as well, and it even says the sequel to Soviet Strike. Soviet Strike, which I don't even have, which was another game that I know for sure was on the PS1. You might have thought it stopped there. It didn't. There's a game called Future Cop LAPD, which this is not an isometric helicopter game, but supposedly it takes place in the Strike timeline made by the same people, and it's a hidden gem. I've heard it's a lot of fun. I picked this up after I saw it in a ton of lists of good PS1 games. Luckily it's still fairly cheap. I want to say $30 complete, and I unfortunately I don't have experience in this. A lot of the games in this video I don't have experience with the sequels like I did in the last one, just because don't have the time, but I would love to check out any of these, and this one is definitely high up on the list. You're almost like a RoboCop mech going around Los Angeles enforcing the law, and maybe it's more like the first person sequences from Urban Strike, I would imagine. Maybe they kind of expounded on that, but that is a series that God, there is so much. It's funny. I didn't know about Urban Strike, let alone Nuclear Soviet and then Future Cops. So definitely let me know if you have some experience with that series. If not, highly recommend it, especially the ones on the Genesis and Super Nintendo. Both are great. Either one systems works out. I played it on both. I played Desert Strike on both. You can't really tell the difference, which isn't always the case for a lot of those games that are on both systems. Now, another one that really bugs me, even though the games are terrible, is back in the day, I was a huge fan of Godzilla. Now, the first NES Godzilla was one of my games, one of my few NES games, and I did not like it, but I loved Godzilla so much, I was never going to get rid of this. There is a code that allows you to unlock all the villains onto one map and play as Godzilla and Mothra and fight against them all. I knew all the villains, I loved all the movies, loved Godzilla through and through. Lo and behold, I found out years later there is a Godzilla 2. How on earth did this slip by me? I mean, this is what's so strange about back then. Had I seen this in Nintendo Power, I would have picked it up. At least I thought I would have picked it up. But yes, a Godzilla 2 came out. Unfortunately, in this game, it's almost like a strategy game. I've never actually popped it in because it looks so terrible. And it is expensive. It's a very expensive game. But another Godzilla on the NES. And then they got Super Godzilla on the Super Nintendo. Another game that is very, very bad. I have played this one. I put it in and played it until I died, and I can't tell you. I don't remember how anything worked, because you're moving in a below the camera perspective. I don't know if you're controlling Godzilla or the town or just. Things just happen and then you're dead. And that's what's so funny about a lot of these older NES and Super Nintendo games is you'll pop it in, and even with the manual, but especially without the manual, you'll start playing it and you'll be like, my God, what the hell is happening? Oh, I'm dead. Okay. Because that would happen. That would happen when you would buy the games. That would happen when you would rent the games. Usually when you would rent them, you'd be like, whew, thank God I didn't buy that. And when you bought them, if you were me, it was like, well, that was a mistake. All right, let's go play Zelda again. Or let's go play Maniac Mansion or something like that. Okay, another series that was on the N64. So I think it first came out on the N64. Kind of got lost in the drolls of all the different racers that I actually really liked. It's not quite F-Zero, but it's F-Zero enough, in my opinion, that it stopped me from actually buying F-Zero on the N64. And that game was Extreme G. So instead of having a hovercraft, you have a hover bike. It's extremely fast, very futuristic, tons of unlocks, tons of cool loop-de-loop worlds. And it's not a great game by any means, but I put a lot of work and a lot of time into this, so much so that when F-Zero, I think it was F-Zero X, came out, I really had no desire in picking it up because this looked like more of the same. Though it's not, don't get me wrong, that game is much better. Well, lo and behold, I never knew that there was a game that came out called Extreme G2, but this one is called Extreme with an X, XG2, which was really stupid marketing on their part, because at this time, had I known there was a sequel to Extreme G, I probably would have gotten it. Luckily, the game itself is not super expensive because it's fairly obscure, and it looks almost identical to the first Extreme G, but that's kind of that almost is more annoying that there was a game that I would have picked up back in the day, but they changed the name, which does happen from time to time. I know Star Tropics did that too, where they had Star Tropics 2 as Zoda's Revenge, and I don't know why companies do this. Especially back then. It's not like it is now where you can see, oh, that's the same game, or that's it. Like, you gotta, about changing it from Extreme D to XG2. Anyways, stupid. All right, another one, I've mentioned this game before, it was essentially N64's version of Metal Gear Solid that eventually did get ported to other systems, but we had it first, and that was Winback. Loved this game, loved the story, loved the characters. Jean-Luc was badass. Not anywhere as good as Metal Gear Solid, but a nice facsimile in my opinion. And I would have definitely picked up more of this series had I thought it continued on. Lo and behold, maybe 7-8 years ago, I found out it did continue on. It continued on with Winback 2 Project Poseidon. But it was on the PS2 and it was on the Xbox. I don't even think they have a GameCube version. This shows you, but still, was there any advertising for this? I don't remember hearing a single thing about this game. And it picks up from the first game. It's supposed to continue the same story. Imagine you're playing as Jean-Luc again. And that just bothered me. That bothered me that I never got to experience that. And I've I've tried to find a reason to play it. I probably should check it out now that I have the ability with the Tink 5X and the PS2 looks so much better. But let me know if you've ever played that game. Let me know if it's worth checking out. Now, here's one that I loved the first game of this. In fact, I think this might have been, because I still don't know what made me buy the PS2. I know I assumed it was the game that I put down, Grand Theft Auto 3, but it also might have been Manhunt, because the timing does make sense. I'm not sure why I would have bought it for Manhunt, but I really enjoyed this. This was when Rockstar was just throwing stuff at the wall and not giving a damn about the bad press they were getting. You play as a character who wakes up in a almost like a Running Man-esque prison type thing where he's being talked to via cell phone and being filmed and having to essentially participate in snuff films against his will, going around killing people brutally with plastic bags and all these like, it was just so innovative that you could do a light kill or an extreme kill. And these executions, not to make me sound like a crazy masochist, but these were one of the big highlights in these games, going back to things like Tenchu and Soul Reaver. Well, I would have picked up a sequel had I known it came out. And it came out on the Wii of all things. Now, not just the Wii, but there was a Wii version that came out. And from what I've heard, it is not very good. So they toned down the seriousness of it. They made it more campy. That's what I've heard, because I haven't had experience with this either, because I don't really want to hook up my Wii. The funny story here, I don't remember when I picked this up. Well, it turns out I picked it up in 2020 when I traded in all my duplicates after I moved to a store called Nostalgia Alley up in Marin. A guy named Jason, really cool guy. And I guess that's where I decided to keep the receipt of everything I got, is in Manhunt 2. And I picked it up there. Let me know. Should I check it out? Is it anywhere near as good as the first one? Because from what I've heard, it is not. All right, here's a recent one that I picked up, as well as recently found out that there's sequels. So I covered this game back, in April or May, and that is Rhapsody, a musical adventure, a turn-based RPG on the original PlayStation. There's a port to the DS. They've recently ported it to the Switch and other modern consoles. It's a very, very poor tactical game, but a very cool game in general. It's essentially a video game musical, which sounds awful if you think about it, but the execution of it is very good, and the game doesn't overstay its welcome. Lo and behold, Rhapsody was the first game in a trilogy, the other two of which did come out on the original PS1 in Japan, but we never got. And right around the time I picked up Rhapsody, I found out that they were localizing for the first time Rhapsody 2 and Rhapsody 3, so I had to pick that up. So I picked up the Rhapsody 2 and Rhapsody 3 from NIS. They made this special collection, which apparently Rhapsody is or in the same universe or a precursor or made by the same people who made the Disgaea series, which makes sense because I'm not crazy about their art style and I'm not crazy about the Disgaea games, but I really like it in Rhapsody. I mean, come on, they're singing and dancing in a freaking video game, which is just such a novelty. I still can't get over it. But I wanted to pick these up because this looked like a really solid game to introduce my daughter to turn-based RPGs if she ever wants to play them. Thought this was a good excuse, and a good excuse for me to buy something that I really didn't need. I'd like to check these out. Not many people have had a chance to check it out legitimately, as it just came out a month ago, but if you've ever checked them out, let me know. I hear Rhapsody 2 and 3, I think they removed the strategy RPG tactics and go to a turn-based style, which they do later with the original Rhapsody when it got ported. And I don't mind that because it really was not a strong turn-based system. I'd be interested in checking out how that plays and also what the music's like, because I mean there was some great bangers in the first one, as well as some horrendous moments like when the Frog Prince suitor gets disowned out of nowhere. Like, I still can't believe that happened in a PS1 game. Brutimus Rex. Alright, so on the N64, one of the first-person shooter type games that came out and had a very unique control scheme that really, I didn't know there was a comic based on it. It just seemed like a really cool game made by Acclaim. That was Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. And then they had Turok 2 The Seeds of Evil that came out that, in my opinion, jumped the shark a little bit. I did not like it nearly as much as the first Turok, because the first Turok you were actually fighting dinosaurs instead of lizard men. Well, I still loved the games. And it turns out they made a game called Turok Rage Wars, which I didn't know about, but it seemed like it was more of a multiplayer game. Well, there was also a game called Turok 3, The Shadow of Oblivion. How did these games come out? And I just had no idea of them. Maybe I was so focused on the GameCube coming out or the Dreamcast or the PS2, I don't know. But there was another Turok game that came out on the N64. I didn't enjoy the second one that much, but I definitely would have picked up a sequel. At least I think I would have. And it looks like it goes even more into that not quite dinosaur-y world, jumping the shark even more, making it not as much. I liked it feeling more like I was a primitive guy with bow and arrows hunting dinosaurs, unless I was using these ridiculous machinery type techs that would shoot off a drill and then heat-seeking missile into a dinosaur's brain. Not even a dinosaur, a lizard guy's brain. But hey, maybe I'm the minority for that one. Alright, here's a fun one. I just talked about this when I was talking about two-player Genesis games, and that is Castle of Illusion. Well, it turns out there actually is a two-player version of this called World of Illusion, where you can play as Donald and as Mickey. But unfortunately, I have yet to pick up that game. But surprisingly to myself, I didn't know that I had the Game Gear version of this, which is called Land of Illusion. Now, it's still a one-player game, but another sequel I had no idea about, just like World of Illusion. And I was a big fan of Castle of Illusion. That was one of my favorite Genesis games growing up. And they did just recently come out with a pseudo-sequel, spiritual sequel called Illusion Island on the Switch and other modern consoles, which from what I've heard is pretty damn fun. And this was another one that I wanted to play with the family once the kiddo gets a little older, because it looks like a fun, simple time. But I do need to pick up World of Illusion, as that is one I am looking forward to trying out, especially with that simultaneous co-op. Alright, now we're getting into another one that annoys me. So I love the Resident Evils on the PS1, and when I found out they were coming out with Dino Crisis, which looked a lot like Resident Evil, but instead of zombies, you were fighting dinosaurs, I had to pick it up. And I loved Regina, I loved the character, I loved the storyline. It was just as scary. If anything, I thought this game was scarier than Resident Evil because the Velociraptors were so much faster, the T-Rexes were huge, and they seemed a little bit more plausible than these giant mutant monster beasts from a virus. Well, years later, I found out that there was a Dino Crisis 2. Yet again, where did these sequels hide? Where are these sequels? Well, how did I not know about these? Because I would have picked this up day one had I known about it. To this day, I still don't have the actual case. I picked this up maybe 7-8 years ago. It's funny, it's got a siphon filter tag for $1.99. That's definitely not what this game is supposed to be. But it's just the disc and the manual. I'm still missing the case. I've never been able to find just a Dino Crisis 2 case, so let me know if you guys ever come across one. I'll buy it off you. I've heard Dino Crisis 2 is a little bit more action-based, so maybe more akin to an Alien versus Aliens thing. But it just looks like a lot of fun, and I'd love to see these games get the Resident Evil remake treatment, or the remasters, or whatever Capcom's been doing. And there is a Dino Crisis 3, I've heard, but I've heard it's also terrible. Much like there's a Parasite Eve 3 that's also not very good. Alright, so this is a fun one. So I actually haven't played the original game, but I have played the game that we never got that didn't come out in America. So the original game is called the 7th Saga. So this is a unique RPG published by Enix where you can start as one of 7 different characters and then go throughout the world. Based on what you're doing, you can then recruit the other 6 characters or they can become enemies of you. It just depends on how you play and what happens with your game. And it utilizes the SNES's Mode 7 when you go into the random battles where you can see on a mini-map. You can actually avoid the random battles because you'll see your dot and then their dot, so it does give you an opportunity to avoid them, but you shouldn't because it is balls hard and you will die very, very quickly if you don't level up and make something out of your character. So that's the 7th Saga. The game I have experience with was actually its spiritual successor, Mystic Arc. So Mystic Arc is a game we didn't get, came out on the Super Famicom. It actually had a port to the Japanese PS1. Same exact style of walking with the minimap and seeing it, and also just as balls hard. However, you don't have the opportunity to choose 7 different people. In this one, you just choose as either a male or a female avatar, but there's no differences between them, and it's a lot of fun. It had a very unique world setting as far as you have one that's like a land of fruits, one that's a land of pirate cats, one that's a land of children, another one that has no color or no sound. And unfortunately, my save data corrupted, and so I was unable to finish it. So I don't know ultimately what the game is like. It's one of my more avant-garde reviews. When I made a video on it, I actually had this idea that I'd love to do again, where I got sucked into the game, and then I reviewed it kind of by showing, not telling, but showing what the game is like, and it was just a fun time. Well, there actually was a sequel to this. So there's a Mystic Arc 2. That I had no idea existed. It's Japanese only. I don't even know if there's a fan translation of it yet. But that is one I would love to check out because I really enjoyed the first Mystic Arc. So it'd be cool to check out what the second one's like because I really have no idea. Alright, here's a game that so there were a few games that managed to pull me away from World of Warcraft when I was heavily invested in it. And one of them was a game called Destroy All Humans. So this, which it has had a port. They ported it to PS4 recently within the last 5 years. Such a silly premise. This was years after Men in Black came out, but the premise is you're playing as the bad guy. You're playing as an alien who comes to Earth and just wants to screw with people. So you literally come down and start hitting people with anal probe rays or disintegrating rays or things of that nature. And each different level you have a different mission. Sometimes you have to go investigate some cows. Sometimes you have to investigate a farm, abduct people. Eventually, by the end of the game, you're fighting off the White House and the military. And it's so insane and zany and was a fun time. Like, really, in 2005, I want to say is when it came out, there was nothing else I'd ever seen like this game. And it was just really stupid, dumb fun. And I had a good time playing it. But after I put it down, I didn't really think about it again. I certainly didn't know that they were making a Destroy All Humans 2, which may have pulled me back. So this also came on the PS2. I'm sure by this time I was way too invested in Burning Crusade or something of that nature. From what I've heard, it's really just more of the same. So it's not like I missed out on anything by not playing it, but it is nice to know that if I ever want to go back and check out the sequel, there's no reason to play the first one because I think they redid 1 and 2 with the remaster. I'm not sure, but let me know. Is 2 worth checking out from someone who did enjoy playing as 1? All right, now this one is a little bit of a cheat. So generally, I have experience with the sequels or the original, and then I didn't know about the spiritual successor. This one is the opposite. So this game, Final Fantasy Tactics, talk about it to death. This is probably my all-time favorite game. It may have surpassed Link to the Past the more I think about it. I love this game. I love the tone. I love the lore, the Zodiac Stones. The systems are not overwhelming, even though there are some systems like the Biorhythm or the Calculator, which I can't wrap my head around. And the sequels to this, which there are sequels, there's Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and then Final Fantasy A2 Grimoire, which I haven't played, and I hear are not as good, so I have been hesitant about going to them, especially because they're on handhelds. But the thing that's the craziest is that there actually was a predecessor to this game. So Final Fantasy Tactics essentially is the spiritual successor from a game called Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together. Now this is the PS1 version. I've actually reviewed the original Super Famicom version, so that's this one right here. But I picked up the PS1 version recently because I really wanted to get all of the different tactics games on the PS1, and I'm pretty damn close to it. I think the only one I'm missing is Brigandine. And this is just a solid game. And if you like Final Fantasy Tactics, you're going to love this game. It is a little bit harder. Now, bear in mind, I've played the Super Famicom version, which I hear they correct some of the issues that I had with it as far as needing to overly grind your team and things of that nature. They did a remake of it for modern consoles. I'd probably say start with that. I think it's Tactic Ogre Reborn or I don't know, something. Tactic Ogre remade, give us all your money kind of thing. But definitely a very, very solid game. And if you like Final Fantasy Tactics and you're looking for more of the same, you can't find anything, in my opinion, that's closer to that than a game made by the people who made it. It's just not as good. But it has multiple endings, which has got that going for it. Alright, here's one that was on the original NES that was a game that took me years to beat, which I finally did beat a few years ago when I was doing a collaboration with my buddy Nefarious West, of all things. I beat it when I did a quick 1-minute review of it, and that is Marble Madness, which is a fun 1-player game, a fun 2-player game. It is actually based on an arcade game, which I didn't even know at the time. And I know a lot of people say without the trackball, it's not as easy to play. I never really found that the case. I've enjoyed playing it on the NES with the controller. Turns out there was a sequel to it called Marble Madness 2 that is actually one of the rarest arcade cabinets ever made. There's only about 3 or 4 of them, and I think it's been dumped now, but for the longest time it hadn't. It hadn't been dumped. So there was screenshots of it, but not much else. But there is a full-blown sequel to Marble Madness that's arcade only and has 9 stages. There's a avatar of a guy called Marble Man, and I really know nothing about it, but yeah, there's a sequel to it, and that's what I love. I love finding out that there are sequels to games I enjoy, even if I have no realistic way of playing it or of owning it. Maybe it'll get re-released, maybe it'll get a port, who knows, but the fact that it's out there is supremely cool. Alright, getting down to the last few. So this is a game I wanted to talk about the last time we talked about forgotten sequels or spiritual successors, and that is a game that once again we didn't get, but it came out in PAL territory in Japan, and that is the Fireman on the SNES. A really fun one-player game where you're going around putting out fires. It looks like it should be 2 players, but it's not. Well, lo and behold, there is a PS1 sequel called The Fireman 2, where it has full voice acting. It really looks like it was made a year later, so it looks like the same engine, the same everything. Graphically, very much the same. Like, as far as a PS1 game goes, it is pretty unimpressive, but as far as being another game in the Fireman series, and especially if you like the first one, you should check out the sequel. And it is still available to purchase on the PS3 download shop. And I remember reading something that said you had to have a Japanese PS3 store, but when I went through and got Elevator Action Deluxe, I was actually able to download this Fireman 2 as well. So I don't know if that was a glitch or what was that. Now I will, and it actually has 2 players. I think that one allows you to play with 2 different players. So one of you has the guy with the hose, one of you has the guy with the shovel or the axe or whatever it is. It takes place in a carnival instead of in like a Nakatomi Buildings type thing. And I played through the first stage. Didn't enjoy it as much as the first game. Now, it still has all of the Japanese voice acting in it, and you cannot skip it. So that might be part of it, but just the fact that you can play a game that we never got and is on the download on the PS3, I think it was like $7, something stupid cheap. You should check it out. Check it out before you can't. And that's one that I'd love to see come out in a physical release one of these days. All right, last 2. So a game I've talked about before that I had on the PS1 that kind of kept me from delving into more RPGs because it was just too damn hard, at least for 12-year-old me or 11-year-old me, whatever age I was. Saga Frontier. So Saga Frontier, you can play as 6 different characters or 7 different characters. Each has their own storyline. Sometimes they intersect, sometimes they don't. Never was able to beat any of them. Really one I should go back to and finish. And I did enjoy it, even despite getting my ass handed to me, because there was a lot of fail scenarios where I would get stuck in areas where you couldn't heal anymore, couldn't go to a town, and I think that happened to me with Rouge's stories or Blue's story. So that was fun, but there was a Saga Frontier 2. Yet again, it's funny how many PS1 sequels came out that I just didn't know existed. I had Game Informer, I had PSN. How did I not know these came out? I don't know. I failed. Saga Frontier 2, and you never hear anything about this game, and it's still fairly affordable for a complete copy. Art style wise, it looks nice, but it's really strange. You don't hear. No one really recommends either of the Saga Frontier games, but especially the second one is almost like Vandal Hearts 2, where it just doesn't exist. And so I'd love to check it out and see if it is worth existing. Alright, and the final one, another game that I played on the Sega channel that I really loved was Jurassic Park, the far superior 16-bit game in my opinion. I know there's a re-release limited runs doing right now of all the Jurassic Parks, I think this one's, actually I'm not sure which ones are on it, but I really love this because you could play as the Velociraptor, and that's enough said. You can play as a damn raptor. I'm sorry, the Super Nintendo one is fun and all, but you can't play as a raptor. Well, I found out about this years ago. I always thought this was just the same game, but no, there is actually Jurassic Park, the Rampage Edition. It's a separate game. More stuff happens on it. Why did they do this? It's called Jurassic Park 2, Rampage Edition. Idiots. And I don't know if you can play. I think you can play as a raptor in this. I think you're still playing as Grant. More of the same. It's kind of like the way they had Jurassic Park 2 on the Super Nintendo, although that was a completely different game that no one talks about as well. But anyways, there you go. That is 15 more sequels and spiritual successors and things of that nature that I had no clue existed. And even worse, I haven't played many of these, so my opinions on them don't really count. let me know if you've played these games. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's some sequels to these that I don't know about, or some other games that that I should check out. As a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday, and let me just reiterate it. Thank you guys so much. I'm so floored right now. The amount of growth I've had in September is more than the entirety of the growth I've had since 2018. 3 years. That is insane. So thank you all. Thank you all so much. Like I said, I have a Patreon. If you please share and like the videos, go back and watch the back catalog. It's just I don't know what to say. I really don't. I'm so incredibly thankful. Thank you to Into the AM for reaching out to me with the shirts. My wife actually thinks I look good in them instead of the normal crap I wear, so that's nice. You guys should check it out too. They fit well. My advice would be size up a little bit, because they're just be honest with yourself. I probably should have gotten a little bit bigger, but no one wants to admit they've gained a few. But I'm just so incredibly grateful. Thank you all so much for checking these videos out. Thank you so much for tuning in. And hey, we'll see you next week, all right? It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.